In today's world, there's no reason why our homes can't work as hard as we do. Occupancy sensors allow lights to turn on and off automatically based off of motion in a room. So they're a really simple technology that can be leveraged in different areas of your house, and they can sometimes fill gaps that normal smart home technologies can't. They can also be a lot simpler to set up too, especially if you don't have other smart home technologies already installed in your house. For an occupancy sensor to work, you don't have to run new wires somewhere or install something else in the ceiling in order to detect motion. You can simply swap out your light switch with an occupancy sensor-based light switch and have all the conveniences you would find in a commercial building. They can also be a lot more convenient than a traditional smart home device because instead of having to speak a command, say to an Alexa device or a Google device, you can simply rely on the occupancy sensor to turn the light on when you enter a room and to turn it off automatically based off of whatever time delay you set on the switch itself. This can be a great solution for common areas such as walk-in closets, laundry rooms, or anywhere else in your home that lights tend to be used frequently and then sometimes left on accidentally. And if you're worried about these occupancy sensors not blending into your current home decor, in my case, this switch came with an installation pack that included a white faceplate as well as faceplates for almond and ivory. They can also replace a two-way or even a three-way switch, which allows for a lot of flexibility when it comes to selecting where these can be placed in your home. Now, with all these great features of an occupancy sensor, before you decide to install this in your home, you do have to be aware of a couple of different limitations. One, since these are motion-based, they're not going to work very well for large areas like a living room, especially if you have one side of the room that's used frequently and another side that's not frequently, and the light switch happens to be on the side that's not used very often. Also, occupancy sensors aren't great for areas that don't see a lot of movement while the room is being used. So places like home offices might not benefit as much from this because the lights will tend to turn off when you don't want them to. The reason for this is there's a tiny sensor inside of these switches that detect movement. And while you can do things like increase sensitivity, they are limited to a specific range and also an angle. So when you're choosing one of these, make sure you understand where your light switch is going to be placed relative to how your room is used. And then also make sure with whatever model you choose, you understand what the maximum square footage of coverage is and also the angle limitations of that specific switch. So to install one of these, it's a pretty simple process, especially if you've done any DIY electrical work in the past. First, you would start out by turning your breaker off for that area and then removing the faceplate for that light switch. Once you remove the faceplate for the light switch, it's always a good idea to make sure the power is turned off by using a voltage detector to make sure everything is off and you've actually selected the right breaker. Once you've confirmed power is off, then you can go ahead and remove that switch. If you have a switch that's installed with backstabbed wires, meaning it's not using the terminal screws to tighten the wires down, sometimes it's easier to just cut these wires off close to the switch instead of fighting with releasing the internal clamp inside of the light switch. After that, it's important to understand where the power is coming from, so the power that's actually coming from your breaker box, and then what wire is controlling the light itself. In my case, I had black wire supplying the power to the switch, and I had a red wire that was run from the switch up to the light, so I knew exactly which wires were which. In your case, if you have multiple wires with a pigtail that's connected to one terminal on the switch, and then you have another single wire coming off of that switch, the single wire is generally going to be the one that is controlling the light. This is also known as the load wire, and the bundle of wires with a pigtail coming into the switch is going to be your line that's feeding that switch. If you only have a single wire attached in both places, then you can either test this with a multimeter to see which wire is which, or you can do some trial and error and install the switch the way you think it should be hooked up, put everything back together, turn the power back on and test it. If it doesn't seem to work right, then you can always turn the power back off and then swap those two connections. Whenever I'm doing electrical work, I like to swap out the wire nuts for Wago lever nuts. These are a lot easier to use, and especially in cases like this, when you're connecting stranded wire to solid wire, it makes those connections a lot simpler and a lot more secure. Once you have everything connected and put back in place, you can turn the power back onto the breaker and test the setup of the occupancy sensor. There's going to be a couple of different settings that you need to pay attention to. One is the light sensitivity, and with this, I recommend starting out in the middle to see how the occupancy sensor behaves for when you're entering and leaving a room. If it doesn't detect you when you come into the room, or if the range is limited, you need to increase the sensitivity. And if it tends to turn on randomly, you'll need to adjust that setting down. The other setting you need to adjust is the time delay, which tells the occupancy sensor how long it needs to wait before it turns the light off after it's done detecting motion. Once those things are complete, that's really all there is to it. Now, as great as these occupancy sensors are, they are limited in terms of what functionality they have. Obviously, you're not going to be able to monitor these or control these and make settings adjustments like you could for other smart home devices from your phone or from your tablet. And you're not going to be able to do things like put them on specific timers or control them while you're away from home. So if those things are important to you, or if they outweigh the convenience of having a light turn on automatically without having to control it with your voice, then I would recommend looking at other smart home technologies that may be a better fit for your specific needs. If you found this video helpful, I appreciate you subscribing to the channel where I cover more topics like this. And also, I have this other video that I put together that I'm sure you'll enjoy as well, so be sure to check that out. All right, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.